My name is Jim Turk, and I am on the board of the Harrison Township Historical Society. And it's my pleasure to welcome you all to this afternoon's program at the Richwood Academy Cultural Center. We're really looking forward to our presentation this afternoon and excited to welcome Robert Greene back here. Bob is Vice President of the Historical Society, a deacon at Mount Calvary Baptist Church in Mullica Hill, and also a community historian who has been bringing us stories over the last 2 years about people whose story needs to be told. And so we're really excited, Bob, that you're back with us to bring us a long overdue story of the life of Sergeant Isaac Hall. So would you all join me in welcoming Bob Greene?
Thank you very much, Jim. My name is Bob Greene. I'm called the local historian. The story that we're going to go over this afternoon is focused on someone's name, Sergeant Isaac Hall. Isaac Hall was a Civil War veteran who entered the Civil War, and then at the end of the Civil War, he became a free man. So we're going to go over that whole process. One of the things I want to acknowledge is I was not originally scheduled to give this presentation. I have a cousin, her name was Diane Cross. She had gone around, Isaac Hall is her great-great-grandfather. And we'll give you a little history on why she did research on him. So I had been talking to her all along. Then she lost her husband, and I visited her when she had lost her husband. And then it came to the point where she was by herself and she became very depressed. And I called down and I was talking to her. And as she was talking to me, she said, "I'm moving." I said, "Well, let me know where you're going, because we're trying to get this whole thing straightened out." The last time I was contacted, I was told she had died, and that her funeral. This is the picture of her and the funeral. So I did go to the funeral. So she had given me most of the information I needed, and she even had put out a DVD, and this is the DVD, and I signed the DVD. So I had a lot of the information that she had provided, plus there was research I had done on my own. So what I'm going to provide this afternoon, I was getting ready to say this evening, is a summary of the information she had gathered on her great-great-grandfather as he was a slave, how he transitioned into a soldier during the Civil War, and also what happened after that. Plus, there's other people that were involved in the Civil War that we don't even hear any mention of, and we're going to touch on some of those. This is the agenda. We've had the welcome. We're going to go over the background of today's presentation, Civil War resources, and I've been to the Gloucester County Historical Society had a presentation where they had some Civil War reenactors to do things. And I'm going to tell you a little bit about that. Diane not only did she do a DVD, she also did a YouTube. I happened to find the YouTube searching through Google. So if everything cooperates and the Wi-Fi doesn't interfere, we're going to see her 45-minute presentation. And there's a lot of detail in that. She did a lot of work putting the presentation together. After that was the legacy, and then we'll have a brief closing. And if anyone sees something and you have a question, try to save it for later. If you can't write it down and you just urgently have to do it, then let me know. Okay. This is my brief introduction. The Historical Society thanks and honors our past and present leaders for their service and sacrifices. We periodically dedicate time to recognize and thank those who paved the way. And there's other things that we're working on. There are people in this township who have done things that most people aren't even aware of. So we're going to try to make sure we honor them. Today, we're honoring the work of Diane Cross, who did a lot of background work for this presentation on her great-great-grandfather, Isaac Hall, who was a slave that served in the 32nd Regiment, Company K, United States Colored Troops in the Civil War. Okay. He was born in March of 1839. He died in July of 1902. All right. Diane has always called this a long overdue story. 200,000 African Americans fought in the Civil War. Diane started with only her great-grandfather's name, a portrait, and oral history. Oral history means some of her grandparents and other people who knew him gave her information, and she wrote it down. The amount of effort she went to do this, I really had to appreciate. In our individual families, we sometimes see pictures of people who we don't really know who they are or what their background is, and then we research it and say, wow, I didn't know all that. But sometimes when you research it, you need to write it down or have a recorder. I recorded Uncle Irv's presentation. My wife knows who that is because it's her side of the family, because he had lived, he actually died when he was 107. So 105 when he still had his right mind. I took a recorder and recorded a lot of things because he had so much information. So if we have people in our family that we want information about, we need to take the time while somebody is still alive that can document these things. Her family in oral history suggests that he had a relationship to the family. Diane considers herself the spiritual guardian of Isaac Hall's legacy and is compelled to share his story. So she spent a lot of time, gave a lot of presentations on her great-great-grandfather. This is more information on that. Now, one of the things in the presentation we're going to do later, she's going to go in a whole lot more detail on some of these things. This activity I find very interesting, which I was not aware of. Diane learned that David Hall owned 2 slaves, a female aged 45 and a male aged 13, according to the 1850 U.S. Census records. She found records in the National Archives and other sources for an Isaac Hall. In fact, there were 7 Isaac Halls. Through the internet search, confirmed the Isaac Hall was enlisted in Sussex County. The War Department, General Order number whatever, offered compensation, listen to this, up to $300 to slave owners in states that haven't succeeded and were still loyal to the Union. In other words, if you have a slave and you want to let that slave go into service, we'll give you $300. But you have to prove that he was actually your property. Slave owners had to swear, I have not purchased said slave from any person or persons disloyal from the government of the United States with the object of receiving compensation for the same. In other words, they just didn't go out and get people and say, give me $300 for this person. They had to prove it. Cross also found evidence of title that asserted that this slave, in other words, she found proof that he provided the proof to the government, and then the government paid him $300, and then her great-grandfather was allowed to go into the service. Now, he did not become free until he had served his time in the service, which was 3 years. So when he went into the service, he's going into battle. So you have to survive the battle, and then you're free. If you just quit in the middle of it, that doesn't count. On March 3rd, 1864, as noted on the deed of remission and release of service document, Hall was successfully enlisted in the Union Army as a free man. He was quickly promoted to sergeant. So he came in as a private, and right away he became a sergeant. What? Device running the problem has to restart. My computer just restarted on me. Well, I happen to have a copy of the presentation, so the depending on how long it takes to come back. Updates are on the way. It decided to automatically update my computer.
30% there.
Excuse me? All right. It's coming back. I'll have to see if it comes back. All right. Until it comes back, I'll tell you what the next slides will say. Okay, Hall was a family man. In the 1870 census record, it revealed that Hall and his wife had 2 daughters, Georgiana, born in 1862, and Mary, born in 1863. His wife, Lovey Hall, was a free woman of color, living in the household of Dr. Edward Dingle, an abolition and a member of the Delaware State House of Representatives. Yeah, okay, we're back. Hopefully it gave me all new software or something. Okay. All right, so this was Isaac Hall's family, but the next 2 slides deal with the fact that he's in the service and what's going on. His regiment was Camp William Penn in Philadelphia, Pennsylvania, and he was sent to Hilton Head, South Carolina on April 27th, 1964. On November 30th, the 32nd Regiment, so he was part of the 32nd Regiment, and we're going to tell you a little about who that was in a few minutes. Had the 3rd Battle of Union William T. Sherman's Path to the Sea. The black 54th Massachusetts volunteer was also in the battle, so there's a big battle going on. On December 16, 1864, the 332nd, now USCT is United States Colored Troops. So you'll see USCT. Why were they identified? All the colored troops were separated from the white troops. They did battle, and sometimes they were sent into the fiercest battle because they fought so strongly. On December 6th, the U.S. CT 32nd successfully took control over a portion of the Confederate Railroad and repulsed a surprise attack the following day. In February 1865, they moved towards Charleston. Charleston's in South Carolina, entering the city on February the 18th, 1860, the day it was surrendered. Okay. Isaac Hall's freedom in civilian life. All right. The first bullet talks about the fact that in April, there was another battle. They captured 20 rebel locomotives and 200 freight cars. That's a lot of equipment. And endured 3 weeks of almost daily skirmish. They performed garrison duty at Charleston, Beaufort, and Hilton Head until the middle of August. However, on August 22nd, 1865, the 32nd Regiment was mustered. That means they were closed down, and Hall was free to leave. Free at last. Free at last. Thank God Almighty. I'm free at last. So we'll find out when the 32nd was put together in the first place. They were only going to be in existence for 3 years. So they did all the battles, they won the war, and then people were allowed to go wherever. What? Antivirus protection, I don't care. Uninstall. Okay. Isaac Hall and his family moved to Camden, New Jersey. He probably spent his remaining years in the towns of Radnor and Berwyn in Pennsylvania. In the 1880 census, now how many people know that the census happens every 4 or 5 years and you're supposed to give them accurate information? We just had a recent census. The 1880 census records a third child. We know he had two. Rachel, I think, was the one that Diane was talking to. That was her great-great-grandmother. In 1888, pension records. This is important now. 1888 pension records listed Isaac's occupation as a laborer, and he was collecting $10 a month, rolling in money, as an invalid while suffering from hernia and kidney disease. In other words, after the battle, after he got out in the civilian world, he's disabled, so he's getting a pension of $10 a month. I don't even care to think about it, but I would say $1,000 a month, but that's just me. Diane Cross discovered his place of burial was Mount Zion AME Church in Devon, Pennsylvania, where he had been a member. She requested and received a headstone from the Veterans Administration to mark his grave. What she had found out when she went over to Mount Zion, there was a lot of headstones, but no names on them. There was just a stick or something in the ground. So she researched from the records at the church, and then she says, okay, my grandfather is in here, and that's where it is. She went to the Veterans Administration. They paid for a headstone. Then they had a formal ceremony and had put the headstone in there. And they had several, she had gone there a couple times and given a couple presentations, which was good. Sergeant Hall is now on the list of at least 18 other named U.S. colored troops in Mount Zion AME Cemetery. Now, when I heard that, locally, we deal with Mount Zion AME in Swedesboro, which is we call Small Gloucester. They now, on Juneteenth and other days, they have ceremonies also. They have a cemetery in the back. Theirs is really separated from the church. You got to go around the corner to get it. And they'll have a commemoration. And they have taken the time to put headstones in and to identify who all these soldiers are from the Civil War and the First World War. And that's good. All right. Civil War resources and uniforms. Well, what did these uniforms they had look like? A little different than what we wear today. Now, he was a member of the 32nd United States Colored Infantry. It says, we served the uniform. Wait a minute, I got this is in the way. The regiment is composed of African-American enlisted men commanded by white officers, was authorized by the Bureau of Colored Troops, was created by the United States War Department on May the 22nd, 1863. The 32nd U.S. Colored was organized at Camp William Penn near Philadelphia. We said that before, beginning February 7, 1864, for 3 years service under the command of Colonel George W. Baird. The 32nd U.S. Colored mustered out of service on August 22nd, 1865. So we are just talking about one of the slaves that were in there was free. But everybody now is free to go out if their master accepted the $300 for the slave. If he didn't, they had to go back to whoever their master were. Now it says, and in most cases, that during the Civil War, all the officers were white. There's other things that were going on that nobody told you about, which we're going to address today. Civil War resources and uniforms. Now, I'm not sure how you can, well, you can see this picture. This picture here, the three people in there, Gloucester County Historical Society provided me with this picture. And there, at 1928, these were the three living people who were part of the Civil War in 1928. So that's when this picture was taken. Now, the one in the middle, right here, was a Kersey. He was Kirk Kersey's great-great-grandfather. Okay. And I've been trying to get in touch with Kirk, and I hope He's all right. When I finally contacted him a little over a week ago, he was in a hospital in Voorhees. He told me I called him on Friday. He was supposed to be getting out Saturday or Sunday. I've called him for the last week and got no answer. So I'm not sure where he is. But what he and his granddaughter actually, this is Kirk. He's part of the Gloucester County Historical Society. They actually gave a presentation like I'm giving on Isaac Hall on their grandfather. So this is Kirk. He did his part, and that's his granddaughter who's given her part. She did a whole lot of research on it. So information is available, and we are trying to find out something about our history and lineage and what happened. And I was trying to get him here so he could address this, but I'm not sure where Kirk is. Civil War react. Okay, up. All right. This here is the Union Army's artillery unit. You'll notice that anybody who was part of the artillery unit had nicer uniform than those who were just regular ground pounders, the infantry. So these right here. Now this gentleman down here is Noah Lewis. He's what we call a reenactor. So he does presentations to talk about what happened. This is me in the center with two other reenactors over at Mount Zion, AME, Small Gloucester. They had a presentation on Juneteenth, and they showed us where the cemetery were, and they went through different things. That's Diane, all the way on the right-hand side. She's in what they call local garb, what do they call it? Period dress. And at one of her presentations, she had a reenactor. Now, I had looked into a couple of reenactors for here, but we'd be here till 5:30 or 6, and I said, no, we don't need that much information. So those are what the uniforms look like. And if you're an artillery man, you got a much nicer looking uniform, because I guess you didn't get dirty. I don't know why. I won't speculate on that. All right. Now the next few slides are what I titled Some Little Known Facts. Everyone had known about some of these people, but there's facts that you probably didn't know about. From 1852 to 1865, Harriet Tubman served as a scout, as well as a nurse, a laundress for the Union forces in South Carolina during the Civil War. Now we knew about the Underground Railroad she did, but there were other things that she did. And it's interesting what happened when she hooked up with the Union. We'll go over that in a minute. Harriet Tubman is known for abolition work, but not many know that she was a spy during the Civil War and led Union men in battle in the Deep South, freeing hundreds of the enslaved. Despite her military successes, she was paid so little that she had to support herself by selling homemade baked goods. And we know a lot of our grandmoms were good at cooking, whether it was baking or just cooking food. In the late 1860s, and again in the late 1890s, she applied for a federal pension for her work during the Civil War. 30 years later, talk about slow hierarchy in the government, 30 years later, they passed a bill in Congress to give her, are you ready now? $20 a month. So instead of getting nothing, she now had $20 a month. Some other little known facts. And I'll show you a picture. Major Martin Delaney. Delaney was born free in Charlestown, Virginia. Although his father was enslaved, his mother was a free woman. Under Virginia's slave laws, children were considered born into the social status of her mother. So she was born free, not because her father was free, but because her mother was free. May the 6th, 1812 to 1885, This free black man had many successes, and you can read all of that. What I thought was interesting, that there was so much turmoil in the country at the time, he decided to leave and went to Canada first, and then went to Liberia. But when the American Civil War began, he returned to the United States. When the United States colored troops were created in 1863, he recruited troops for the famous 54th Massachusetts Regiment, for which he served as a surgeon. Okay, this is a black man as a surgeon. He was commissioned as a major. In February 1865, Delaney became the first African-American field-grade officer in the United States Army. So everybody else could come in as a sergeant or private or what have you, but they had to have white officers over. He was allowed to come in because he was a surgeon, he was intelligent. They decided, okay, we'll make you an officer. So they made him a major. So there was a commissioned officer leading some of the black folks at the time. And these are actually two pictures of him. I tried to blow them up real big, but I couldn't. And you can see how his uniform is different than everybody else's uniform. So on the left is when he was in the service. On the right, when he came out, it says, Martin Delaney returned to Wilberforce, Ohio, prioritizing the education of his children, a testament of, I forgot to read the top. After the Civil War was over, he went again to the South, selling in South Carolina. There he worked for the Freedmen's Bureau and became politically active, resulting in the colored conventions movement. Delaney ran unsuccessfully for lieutenant governor as an independent Republican. So he actually ran for office, but he didn't succeed. But at least that we have one black officer in the Civil War. You won't hear that anywhere else, but check under Major Robert Delaney. The information is there, we just don't hear about it. All right, Diane Cross feels a real connection with Isaac Hall's spirit, and he wants his story to be told. Diane speaks about his service. It was appeared on YouTube as a long overdue story. Now we have the web here, so I'm going to try to bring that up to show you one of her presentations. Now, since it's YouTube, they attach a commercial on the front of it. I'm not sure. Now, I don't know how you control the volume for that. I have my volume up as much as I can hear.
Hi everyone, thanks for coming out on a rainy night. I'm Brendan Smith, I'm the Arts and Humanities
That's
Coordinator
it.
for the City of Tacoma Park. And this is the latest event in our Tacoma Park Arts Cultural Series. We have film screenings, lectures, and art exhibitions.
All right. I'm going to just let this run.
Event, we're celebrating Black History Month. We'll also be having a concert tomorrow night at 8 p.m. with Yasmin Band and guitarist. Next Thursday at 7:30 p.m. we'll have a showing of vintage civil rights films, so we'll keep an eye out for those too. You can also go to tacomaparknd.gov/arts to find out more news about all of our events. So tonight we're very excited to have Diane Cross here talking about her great-great-grandfather, Sergeant Isaac Hall. I'm going to hand things over to Diane now. Thank you.
You'll notice Diane is in period gear.
Good evening. It is my pleasure to be here, and I really thank you all for coming out on such a rainy night. I would like to ask you to hold all questions and comments until the end of the presentation. Thank you. The year 2011 was the sesquicentennial, the 150th anniversary of the start of the Civil War, a war that would last for 4 long years and claim as many lives as all of our other wars combined. In 1863, the black man was called to fight, and over 200,000 would answer that call. This evening, I'd like to share with you the story of one of those men. For as long as I can remember life, the picture of that soldier hung in my grandmother's living room. As children, my siblings and cousins, we didn't know who he was. We didn't even know if he was a real person. But we knew he was a soldier, and that's what we called him, the soldier. While I was still young, I guess my grandmother thought it was time to tell me of my roots. She said the soldier was her grandfather and that he fought in the Civil War. His father was born in Africa, brought to this country as a young boy, and sold into slavery. Well, I have to tell you, I was a grandma's girl. I spent so much time with my grandmother that my brother used to tease me that I was old like Nana. But I listened to her stories, her old slavery time stories, as she used to call them. Some were cute and funny, where the slave would outwit the owner, and then there were those that were neither cute nor funny. But she talked about our family in the old days. She said we were great cakewalkers. I had no idea what the cakewalk was. But I did a little research, and I found that in the 1850s, on southern plantations, slaves would get together as a form of entertainment, and they would imitate their owners. And when it came to the cakewalk, what they were imitating is what they thought was high society. So you see, that was a very high, stepping, strutting, prancing type dance. And the owners got involved because the people that did these dances were called walkers, and they wanted to see who had the best walkers. And they gave out prizes to the man. He would get a cake, but not cake as we know it. He would get a big biscuit wrapped in a cabbage leaf. And the lady would get a pulled molasses type candy. And my grandmother said the Halls always went home with the prize. And 2015, I was in Gettysburg for Remembrance Day, and I went to the ball that evening, and they played the ladies' cakewalk. And I want you to know that yours truly went home with the prize. Well, my grandmother also talked about her family, but she talked about the family that she said we were nice-looking people. That her mother, Rachel, was the belle of Georgetown, Delaware, and that her grandfather had attended a function one evening, and the next morning she heard the neighbors say, Ike Hall was there looking like 24-karat gold. Well, gold looks good to most of us, so he must have looked pretty good. And to this very day in our family, when we want to give the ultimate compliment, we tell each other, you look like 24-karat gold. Well, as time went on, the picture was just part of the furnishings in my grandmother's living room. And it wasn't until the Roots came on the first time that we even thought about it. And Roots, just to give you a little refresher, Alex Haley, he traced his ancestry back to Gambia, to his ancestor Kunta Kinte. And while I was watching it, and he came over also as a young man sold into slavery, and while I was watching it, I was, wait a minute, I've heard this story before. My grandmother talking about her grandfather's father. And at that time, she mentioned also that his slave name was Tunnel. Well, anyway, as I'm watching it, I went to my grandmother, and by this time she had failed considerably. But I asked her, I said, Nana, you said that your grandfather's father's name, slave name was Tunnel. did you know another name for him? Maybe an African name? She said, no. And she said, I just can't remember. And shortly after that, my grandmother passed away. But it wasn't until near the end of her life did I realize how much the picture meant to her. She sold her home and moved into an apartment and had beautiful antiques. But of all her possessions, she said, I want to hold on to this for as long as I can keep house. And she told my mother, she said, when I'm no longer able to take care of my home, I want you to have it because I know you'll take care of it. And take care of it my mother did until she was no longer able to keep her house. Well, time goes on, and then we have the Ken Burns theory of the Civil War. And I was working at that time, and a couple of my coworkers, we were talking about how well done it was, how much we enjoyed it. And I took the opportunity then to tell them that my great-great-grandfather fought in the Civil War. They said, did he fight with the 54th? And I said, I have almost nothing to go on. And many of you may have seen the movie Glory, and that was based on the 54th Massachusetts, which was the first black regiment raised in the North. So I said, only thing I have is a picture, and I know his name. He said, you have a picture? I said, yes. Is he in uniform? I said, yes. A friend of mine worked for National Geographic, and I asked him if he would come and photograph the picture, and he did. And I took it into work. And one of my coworkers was a Civil War reenactor. So he took one look at this. He said, he's infantry. I said, how can you tell? He said, the light blue pants. I have the same uniform. And then he said he was an enlisted man. He wasn't contraband. Contraband were many of the enslaved Africans that followed the troops. He said, no, this man was an enlisted man. And since we knew his name, we did a search under Isaac Hall, and what they fought in were the U.S. colored troops. And we found that there were 7 Isaac Halls who fought in the U.S. colored troops. So you see, my work was cut out for me. But I always like to say at this part of the presentation, I'm just so glad his name was not John Smith. Well, we did the search, and then we found out, and then I said, well, I have to call my cousin who has my grandmother's Bible. And I asked him, was there anything in the Bible about the Hall side of the family? He said, no. And then he said, wait a minute, Di. On a paper napkin, my grandmother had written her grandfather's name and the month, her grandfather's name, Isaac Hall, and the month and the year that he died, and her grandmother's name, Lavinia Hall, and the month and the year that she died, and placed it in the Bible as if to say, someone is going to be looking for this. Well, as time goes on, we had another friend join our little band of history detectives, and I told him the same thing. I said, I'd love to find out more about him, because the picture's starting to come alive a little bit to me. But I said, I have so little to go on. But I told you I was a grandma's girl, and I listened to her stories, and that she said her mother was the belle of Georgetown, Delaware. So we did a search on Georgetown, Delaware, and found that it was in Sussex County. And one of the 7 Isaac Halls who had enlisted was from Sussex County. So again, time went on, and when I see this friend again, he hands me an envelope. Well, when I opened the envelope, it was the service records for Isaac Hall. Well, I was so excited, I could hardly hold on to them. I read them, I reread them, I put them down, picked them up. I was just overwhelmed. But I was excited, but still, I had a nagging feeling, because we're talking about 7 Isaac Halls, and I wanted to make sure I had the right one. So I went down to the African American Civil War Museum in Washington, D.C., and I spoke to the curator, and I said, I feel 9 and 9/10 sure that this is my ancestor, but I want to see something that connects me to him. He said, you need to look at pension records. Pension records read like a biography. So I went down to National Archives. That's where his service records had been obtained. And I asked for the pension records for Isaac Hall. Again, I was handed an envelope, and when I opened it up, they were the original documents. These documents were so old, they had not been digitized, that the edges crumbled as I read them. And I read the document. It said that he was married. His wife's name was Lovey, and that he had been married by a preacher, and I'm reading it. But the name Lovey, I said, no, the Bible said Lavinia. So, but that wasn't a deterrent, because somewhere in the back of my mind, I seem to remember my grandmother talking about Lovey. So I continued to read on, and when I got to his 7 children, I knew then beyond a doubt that I had found my ancestor, because there listed was my great-grandmother Rachel and other names I had heard all of my life. I knew then I had found my ancestor. Isaac Hall was born a slave in March of 1839. He was born in the service of David Hall, who had owned his parents as well. He was a slave for the first 26 years of his life. The Emancipation Proclamation did not affect Isaac Hall. The Emancipation Proclamation only affected those slaves in the states that were in rebellion, in the states that had seceded. Delaware was one of the 5 border states. These were slave states that had remained loyal to the Union. Isaac Hall was still a slave. His path to freedom was the War Department General Order 329, issued October 3rd, 1863. It was in 1863 that President Lincoln was beginning to realize, with low enlistment and even lower morale, that he was not going to win the war without the help of the black man. I'd like to read a quote to you. Without the military help of the black freedmen, the war against the South could not have been won. President Abraham Lincoln, 1865. Now, the War Department General Order, it allowed for recruiting offices to be set up in these border states. Now, for the freedmen, it wasn't a problem. They could just go and enlist. But a slave was considered property. But this order addressed that. They offered loyal slaveholders compensation up to $300 for the enlistment of their slaves into the military. Now, but there were several steps you had to do to file a slave claim, as they were called. Firstly, you had to swear allegiance that you were loyal to the government and to the Constitution of the United States. Secondly, you had to prove it was your slave. You just couldn't walk in there with any black person trying to collect your $300. Where there's money, there's corruption. David Hall was claimant number 28 in the state of Delaware. Claimant number 27 was less of an honorable man. He arrived with a free black apprentice trying to pass him off as his slave. He was discovered, his claim was denied, and he was labeled a scoundrel. Many of you may have seen the movie 12 Years a Slave. Yes, those things did happen. Then you had to show proof that you had enlisted your slave into the service. And this order also stated, for all those who fought in the service of the United States would be forever thereafter free. You had to free your slave. Well, David Hall did all that he was required to do, and he received his $300. But more importantly, my great-great-grandfather, classified as a slave for life, was now a free man. Now, I have copies of the documents that David Hall signed. And the first one, and you'll bear with me because this is in his handwriting, but it was the most emotional for me, because We're talking about a title to a human being. Evidence of title. I, David Hall of Baltimore 100, Sussex County and State of Delaware, do hereby certify that Isaac Hall, who has enlisted in the 32nd Regiment, U.S. Colored Troops, Company K, is my slave. And at the date of his enlistment, as aforesaid, he was owing me service for and during the term of his natural life, and that I became possessed of him by reason of him being born of slave parents in my service. This is David Hall, 1865. Deed of manumission and release of service. This is the document that gave Isaac Hall his freedom. Deed of manumission and release of service. Whereas my slave, Isaac Hall, has enlisted in the service of the United States, now in consideration thereof, I, David Hall of Sussex County, Delaware, do hereby, in consideration of said enlistment, manumit, set free, and release the above-named Isaac Hall from all service due me, his freedom to commence on the 3rd day of March, 1864, the date of his enlistment in the aforesaid 32nd Regiment of Colored Troops in the service of the United States. Certificate of the Award of Board of Claims, Office of the Board of Claims for slaves enlisted in the service of the United States, Georgetown, Delaware, March 27, 1865. We hereby certify that David Hall of Sussex County, Delaware, having proved under oath his loyalty to the Constitution and government of the United States and established his title as to the ownership of Isaac Hall, a slave enlisted at Wilmington, Delaware, on the 3rd of March, 1864, by a Captain D.S. Yardley in the service of the United States in the 32nd Regiment of Colored Troops, Company K, and having filed a valid deed of manumission and release of service of said slave, is entitled to the sum of $300, which has been awarded to him by this board as remuneration for all claim to the future labor or service of said slave under the provision of General Orders, War Department number 329, 1863. I'd like to read a quote to you. Once let the black man get upon his person the brass letters U.S. Let him get an eagle on his button and a musket on his shoulder and bullets in his pocket, and there is no power on earth which can deny that he has earned the right to citizenship in the United States. Frederick Douglass. It was Frederick Douglass and Martin Delany who were largely responsible for persuading President Lincoln to enlist the black man. The 32nd Regiment of U.S. Colored Troops was organized at Camp William Penn, Philadelphia, Pennsylvania, February 7th to March 7th, 1864, and then ordered to Hilton Head, South Carolina. Isaac Hall enlisted for a period of 3 years. Now, the USCTs, as they were called, United States Colored Troops, were the forerunners to the Buffalo Soldiers. Buffalo Soldiers were given their name by the native Cheyenne American for their fierce fighting spirit. Now, being able to use the internet, I was able to do a search on the regiment, and it gave me the complete service history, of which I'd like to highlight a couple of events. The first one was the Battle of Honey Hill, November 30th, 1864. This was the third battle of Sherman's march to the sea, but not led by General Sherman. The 32nd was part of a 5,000-man expedition, and the purpose of this expedition was to cut the Charleston-Savannah Railroad, which was the lifeline of the Confederacy. And it was the lifeline of the Confederacy. Had this been a success, which it wasn't, you have those that believe that the Charleston-Savannah Railroad would have fallen to the north, and the Savannah would have been evacuated, Charleston would have fallen, and the war would have been over. But it didn't happen that way. It didn't happen that way because the federal troops did not know the terrain of the land. Now, if you're ever in the area of Granville, South Carolina, you will find a road marker that reads thusly. Did I get ahead of myself here? There it is. Battle of Honey Hill. During this battle of November 30th, 1864, Confederate Commander Charles J. Colcock, by ordering that a nearby field of grass be set ablaze, delayed approaching federal troops and gave the Confederates time to collect additional forces. When the Confederate position could not be taken, the Union troops retreated. The site is located about a mile north. Well, when those federal troops got to that field, it was still burning. And on that day, it was recorded that a wind picked up and it blew the fire till it rained fire down on these troops. Now, uncontrolled fire will back up the best of us, and it did them. It put them in a complete state of disorder. But I believe that that fire paled in comparison to the fire of freedom that burned in these men. You see, the war had become personal to them. They were fighting for their freedom and for the freedom of their loved ones, most of whom were still in bondage. And I know in my heart of hearts and in my soul that my great-great-grandfather was fighting for me and you, the future generations. You see, those men, they knew what was behind them. They knew slavery. And they were not going back. Oh, freedom. Oh, freedom. Oh, freedom over me. And before I'd be a slave, I'll be buried in my grave and go home to my Lord and be free. So no, they were not successful on November 30th in cutting the Charleston-Savannah Railroad. But several days later, on December 6th, they were able to cut the line, which enabled Sherman to arrive in Savannah in triumph. Those men helped pave the way for Sherman's march.
We're filming this on YouTube, so just raise your hand and wait till you get the mic. And
It's sort of a technical question in a way, but
used to always be able to look at my grandparents' Bible and find the history of the family. We don't do that anymore. I can look in the front of most of the Bibles of anyone my age, and there's nothing there other than who gave it to you. But at least they had a record of who. And since that was their family, they knew when they were born, when they died, and when they got married. And they recorded it. They didn't have any other place to record it. So they recorded it in the Bible, because everybody used the Bible. They didn't have reading books, but they had the Bible. And they could learn to read from the Bible. The Bible's not just a book. Don't get me started. Legacy. Listen to and learn from and document things that you learn from your parents and your elders. Because they're not going to be around all the time. I have one incident that I'm still troubled about. When I was growing up, every summer I went to my grandparents who lived in Virginia, really out in the country. No tractors, mules, horses, and cows. In the bed that I stayed in, and later when my brother came with me, we were right over the kitchen. When you were in the bed and you looked straight ahead, there were two pictures of two men on the wall, and there was a picture of a lady on the wall over there. And I saw that, and I did ask, well, who's that lady? My grandpapa said, that's my mother. I said, oh, okay. She was a Crow Indian. I said, well, where's your father's picture? He said, they didn't take pictures of men at that time. Oh. So I said, who are those two? Now, I didn't ask that until very late in life. I found out who one of the person was. To this day, I never found out who the other person was, but I know it was a close relative of the family. I had the opportunity to find out who it was because my cousin Harry, who lived in Glassboro, who had his family down there, I showed him the picture and he said, go talk to the lady two houses down on the corner. She grew up in Virginia and she knows everybody. I said, well, I can't do it right now, but yeah, I'll come back and do that. Well, when I came back to do that, guess what? The lady was dead. So we've had several family reunions. I keep showing the picture. There's nobody alive that can tell me who that picture is. I still got it. But who am I to ask? Nobody's writing on napkins. Nobody's putting anything in Bibles in them. We should. Have family reunion and gathering at times other than funerals.
My Lord.
We do meet at funerals. But what about a family reunion? Just a gathering of everybody that's alive and talk. Don't spend time with people that don't appreciate your worth. Their aim is to drag you down and keep you in your place. So be careful who you hang with. Cherish every moment and every person in your life because you never know when it'll be the last time that you see them. Those are important things. Now, I don't know what I did with it. This sign here is the church cemetery in Small Gloucester. Okay. This one over here, I don't know if they're still having it. It's in Monroe Township in Franklinville, New Jersey. They found a plot of land that were a lot of headstones on, and well, headstones that were black soldiers that were just put there because they had no other place to put them. A group got together and found out who was where, and they labeled everything, and then they got a big sign up saying who they were. And a lot of them were part, now we talked about the 23rd Regiment. But now there's names, and they would periodically, usually in May, around Memorial Day, we'd go over there and have a ceremony. So there is an attempt now for all these unlabeled bodies, in some cases unlabeled cemeteries, for people to take the time to do it. Now there are some I know of that are grown up. There's trees that are taller than me that nobody's maintaining. But wherever it's possible, that's being done. Closing words. Before I give you my closing words, do you have any questions or any comments you'd like to make? right, thank you for your attention. As you go out into the world, help make the world a better place by using your gifts and talents to be a blessing to others. Believe in yourself and stay focused. Keep knocking and the door will open. Sergeant Hall and his great-granddaughter Diane's achievements were all the more impressive because of the obstacles and bias and skepticism they faced, but they did not quit. Yes, thank you.
Oh, I'm sorry. I'm sorry. How often do they go out to the unknown cemetery, and are they accepting volunteers now, or do you know?
I don't know. They haven't contacted me this year.
Okay,
We were there last Memorial Day.
okay.
They haven't contacted me this year, so I'm not sure.
All right, we'll let you know. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Again, you have brought us stories that otherwise remain untold. And we are very grateful for your sharing your time and your work with us. And I also should say that this is part of a series of 2 programs that are going to be focused on more unknown stories or little told stories. In 2 weeks, we're going to be welcoming the distinguished historian and jurist Nelson Johnson, who wrote Boardwalk Empire and also The North Side of Atlantic City. And his program is going to be focusing on the debt that Atlantic City owes to its African American community. It will be an exciting program, and Mr. Johnson will have copies of his book with him, so for purchase and for signing, so you can get a personally inscribed copy for yourselves. We do hope to see you back here again in 2 weeks, 3 o'clock. And that will be on the 18th of May. That's an exciting weekend. The day before, on May 17th, we will be celebrating the Asparagus Festival at Old Town Hall in Mullica Hill. Did you know that on May 18th, or 17th, excuse me, 1922, the first air shipment of fresh produce in America was 1,000 pounds of asparagus that took off from Mullica Hill to Boston. Wow. And we are celebrating that historic event with an asparagus festival. It includes a Battle of the Chefs tasting contest featuring the finest chefs of our community, and they will be battling it out to get your vote for the very best use of asparagus. In addition to that, there will be a local foods marketplace set up across the street at around the town hall, and there will be exhibits. The exhibition that is currently on view at the museum, Animal Kingdom, Man and Beast, will be open, and in connection with that, South Jersey Rescue will have a pet adoption center set up, so you can have asparagus and a new pet. Tickets are available for the tasting online at our website, harrisonhistorical.com, and we hope that we will see you there. And so you have asparagus on Saturday, and that will keep you well nourished to come back on Sunday for Mr. Johnson's presentation. I do want to give out a shout out to the Gloucester County Cultural and Heritage Commission of South at Rowan College. Their support is supporting this program series in conjunction with the New Jersey Historical Commission, Department of State. And we are grateful for their support and for your support as well. Together, we make all this happen. So, I believe I've covered everything I need to. Did I miss anything?
I think you did very well.
Well, thank you. You too. Mutual admiration.